George Seurat was born December 2nd, 1859 in Paris. George had two siblings, one brother, one sister. The early life of George showed an interest in art at a very young age. He later went to an art-based school from 1878 to 1879. George left the school at the age of 20. After leaving the school, he went into the Army for a couple of years. After the Army, George moved back home and later moved to the island of La Grande Jatte in 1881. This move served as one of Seurat's biggest inspirations, and it was on the island that the artist painted one of the defining pieces of his career. The later life of George's first piece of art, entitled Bather at Asnières, was rejected by the Paris Salon in 1883. After being rejected, George joined a group of other fellow artists that were also rejected. In this group, he met a guy named Paul Signac, which also viewed the same way of art that George did. Out of this, he developed his work of pointillism. The piece that got George's career started off was the Sunday Afternoon. George had two kids, and George's Seurat died March 29th, 1891, only months before the death of his second son. They do not know the cause of death, but they say that the son died from the same thing that George did. The medium that George used was oils. George Seurat's style and technique. A few of the subjects that George used were abstract, figure, landscapes, and scenery. George first started out with black and white drawings. It was said George wanted to master the technique of black and white drawings because the artist always being in a hurry and drawing allowed him to depict a scene at a rapid pace. George was really focused on expressing the essence of light in a piece of art. He used to form a brushstroke that would make pieces extremely detailed. How he did this, he used firm parallel strokes or faint outlines. Such a technique controls the depiction of moonlight in the piece and gave more definition to his figures, which is what he later became known for. Seurat would often also scrape off parts of the finished piece in order to highlight certain areas of the finished drawing. George's later career was marked by his interest in the science of color. The theories on color were based around the basic principle that if two color dots overlapped, that the third color would be formed. Such a process meant that there was never a need to blend colors together. Coming from this was pointillism. George's theory led him to develop pointillism, as I said, which was a vibrantly different artistic style where paintings were comprised of tiny, colorful dots. The following slides are a few of George's pieces of art. The first we have here, a riverbank. This was done in 1883. These first couple pieces show George's work with the brushstroke on how he used the firm parallel strokes or faint outlines to bring out an object in a painting. The next we have is the morning walk. This was done in 1885, and this was also the brushstroke. Here we have George's piece entitled The Lighthouse. This was done in 1886, and this is different than those first two. This one is done by the pointillism. Here we have The Circus, done by George in 1891. As you can see, 1891 was the year that George passed away. They say that this was the last piece that George was working on. He did not get to fully complete it. And last we have George's most popular piece, A Sunday Afternoon on La Grande Jatte, which that is the island that he moved to after he got out of the army. This was done in 1886, and this piece is 7 feet by 10 feet wide and tall. This was the piece that got George's career started off